Hello and welcome to this PISA data analysis training video. In this video, we'll learn how to use the IDB Analyzer for statistical analysis with the PISA data. In this video, you will learn how to use the IDB Analyzer to conduct analysis with the student and school data, calculate percentages and means and significance testing between the groups, how to calculate percent of students using proficiency levels, and how to calculate regression coefficients. Remember that information about downloading and installing the IDB Analyzer is presented in a separate video. One of the first things that you need to do to work with the IDB Analyzer and with the PISA database is to define the scope of work. The PISA dataset has many countries, has all the OECD and the partner countries, so there's about 70 plus countries included. What we've done for this video and for this academy is we selected a subset of the countries, and in a separate video we showed you how to select the cases for Germany, Sweden, United States, Singapore, and Malta. We also created files with the student data combined with the school background characteristics, and you can combine the student with, there's also teacher data, there's parent data, but we'll focus on using student background data and school background data. Before we keep going, we continue, I want to remind you of the two most important rules in data analysis. Rule number one is to check the data, and rule number two is never to forget rule number one. And this is, a bit of a joke, but also serious. So what I'm going to show you with the IDB Analyzer is a lot of output that comes out at the beginning of the results so that you can use them to check the data to make sure that it meets the requirements and there's, it is within the expected range. In this video, we're going to do 3 example sets. The first one, we're going to look at the following. What is the average reading literacy by number of books in the home and school location? So we're going to use those two variables as classification variables. And we are also going to look at the average like in reading. There's a variable called JOYREAD by gender to see whether boys or girls like reading better. So to do this analysis, we're going to do the following. We're going to first load the IDB Analyzer, double click, and then I'm going to choose here, I'm going to work with SPSS, but if you choose SAS, then it will do exactly the same. It has the same functionality, but it will then create a SAS syntax. I'm also going to select the analysis module here. And you'll see that we created this file before with the merge module, so that's what's going to be showing up here, the student and school file. And I'm going to also go to the work directory and check that the files are there, and here is where I'm going to be looking to store the files that I create and the work that I'm going to be doing. So we're working with the student and school. We select the file. I'm going to select it again to see what the steps that have to be followed. It's going to ask you what study it belongs, and you're going to select PISA here. Okay. And then for analysis type, you're going to select, this is a post 2015 and older, so you're going to select PISA student level data. If you select pre-2015, it's going to give you an error because it's not going to find a variable that is supposed to be there. So select PISA student level data. You'll see the variables here on the left, the description of the variables and the variable names. So we said we were going to do percentages and means of reading literacy. So we use plausible values by 2 variables. So I'm going to select first the plausible values. I'm going to click here, and we're going to select reading alone. But you could also do several of them at the same time. But for this example, we'll do just reading. And we're also going to do the analysis using grouping variables, but we're going to do them by location and by books in the home. So this is why I'm going to put them here under separate tables by. So I'm going to click here, books in the home, and there's going to be a variable here called how many books are there in your home, and you can right click on that, details. It'll tell you there are 6 categories. This is how the variable is coded. So you're going to select that variable, move it to the right under separate tables by, and then we also wanted to look at school locations. So I'm going to do location, and there's a variable here called which of these variables, which of the following definitions best describes the community in which your school is located, and details is village, small town, a city, or a large city. So we're going to move that to the right. So we're going to be doing reading literacy by books in the home and by school location, separate tables. So you're going to get one table for these, one table for these. Going to define, and we're going to go here to the work directory, and we're going to write here reading literacy by location, by books, location. Enter. And then we're going to start SPSS, and this should launch SPSS. Again, we're doing average reading literacy by books in the home within country and by location of the school within country. Start SPSS. And you see that you get the syntax here that has the variables that we have selected, the file that we're going to work with, and where the output is going to go. Once we have this, there's 2 ways of running this. We can do Control-A followed by Control-R, or easier yet, run all. When I do that, you'll see that it will show you here that it's processing. And it'll take a while because it's a relatively large file, so I'm going to stop the video and come back when this is done. So this is done processing, so I'm going to go back to the top to show you the output that you get. So we're going to have, first of all, results for books in the home by country, reading possible values. And you see that PISA uses 10, so you have the results for the 10. So the first thing that you see is unweighted statistics for the variables that are going to go into the analysis. And again, this is to help you check the quality of the data. You want to make sure that the means are within range, the minimum and the maximum are within range, and so on. Then you have the groups here. Then I'm going to scroll down, and then you get to where you're going to get weighted results. And again, this hasn't integrated the results from across the possible values, but you get the, again, this is for descriptive statistics to verify the quality of the data. And then you're going to get to processing log, which is going to be right here. It tells you that it's processing the first possible value, second with 80 replicates. And then you get to the numbers that we were looking for, and this is the categories of books in the home by country, the number of cases per category, the sum of the weights. This represents the estimated number of people in the country that fall in this category. You have the average reading, standard deviation, and you have the standard errors calculated as the technical reports recommend we calculate them, and the percent missing, which would be 0 in this case. If you keep scrolling down, you'll get a graphic that shows the relationship between reading and books in the home. And we see that in general, the more books in the home, the higher the reading literacy in the home. but all the countries seem to like drop down a little bit, except for Germany. But the general trend here is that there's a positive relationship between books in the home and reading literacy. And that's what we see here as well when we look at the means. That's what's being plotted, these means here. If we keep going down, we get this graphic that shows the same information. This is the average reading literacy by books in the home. Here we have the categories. And we have the percent of people in each one of the categories of books in the home. So we have United States has the most people with the fewest books in the home. Next, you're going to find the results for the next variable, which was a school level variable. And this is the type of community where the school is located. So we get unweighted statistics. We get weighted statistics. And we get the processing of the 10 plus all values and the results. So here we have the percent of people at each one of these groups, the number of people, and the average by average reading literacy by subgroup. Singapore, everyone is in a large city, so there's no, it's a city-state, so there's no variability here. And then that's what we see here. We see that here's the relationship between reading literacy and the size of the community where the school is located. And, we see that there doesn't seem to be a relationship here between these two variables. We have the same information in a bar chart. And we have the proportion of people in each one of those types of communities. So these are the results that you get in the SPSS output. If you go to the work directory where all this has been written, you'll see that you have several files here. You'll have one file for the student level variable and one for the school level variable. And if I open that file, double clicking, you see that you have the information that was presented in the table. You have the countries. Here you have the categories for the variable. You have the dependent variable reading, number of cases, and so on. Here you have the mean PVs, the mean plus all values, the standard error of the mean, and so on. You also have some log information here, like the replications, the method used, the number of plus all values, etc., where the file was read from. So that's one piece of information. That's the results that were presented in the table. The other files that you find here, which would be also very useful, is those that have to do with significance testing. So the program will automatically do significance testing between each one of the subgroups. So opening that file, and you'll see that you have now the comparison between 0 to 10 books and each one of the other categories. So you have the mean for those that had 0 to 10 books and the mean for each one of the other categories. You have the difference between those means. You have the standard error of the difference. And then you also have the t-value for the difference. And you see that the t-value is always large and it gets bigger, So well, except for the last one. So there is a statistically significant difference between this group and that group, between this group and that group, this group and that group, this group and that group. So that's what this table, the significance table, is going to present significance results of all possible paired comparisons between the groups in your analysis by your grouping variables, in this case by country ID. The next analysis that we wanted to do was compare reading enjoyment by gender. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go back to the IDB Analyzer, and now we're not going to be using a +L value. So we select none used. Everything here gets cleared. And we're going to look at differences by gender. So I'm going to click select here, and there's a gender variable. Select there, gender, student standardized gender. Going to be a grouping variable. And then our analysis variable is going to be reading enjoyment. So I'm going to look for it here, enjoy, and we see the doesn't show up there, so let's look for it here. Enjoy, read, joy read. Here we go. So sometimes you gotta try it different ways to make sure that you get the right variable. So read joy, over there. So we're gonna define now the output file, and that's gonna be called read joy by gender. Enter. And so we have read joy by gender within country. Start SPSS. We get the syntax. We do Control A and Control R to run it, or we just do run all. This shouldn't take as long as with the +L value because you have only, you're not using +L values here. So you'll notice that it's all very quick. So going over the output, what you have here is first reading joy by male, female, by country, unweighted. And again, you want to check the statistics. If you look in the technical report, you'll know that this variable goes between -3 and +3, so that's what you're looking at here. You scroll down, descriptive statistics, now these are weighted. Processing 80 replicates, compute variance terms, and you get the results. So you get the reading enjoyment by gender within country. And this is usually easier to see the relationship when you look at the graphic. And you see that across the board, all countries, the average reading enjoyment is lower for males than it is for females, with a bigger drop for Germany. And you have this bar charts here showing the same information. And you have here the proportion of males and females as part of the information that you get from the output. So you get this in your SPSS output, and if you go to the work directory, I'm going to sort this by date so you see the latest ones that were created. You'll see that you have the syntax for the read joy by gender, you have the overall results, and you have the significant testing that gets done here. And I'm going to open this. And you see the mean in the variable, standard error, and the significant results, and it's very statistically significantly different. The manual would explain to you what these columns are, so I'll refer you to the manual for that explanation. Okay, so now for our second example, we're going to look at what is the proportion of students in each of the reading literacy proficiency levels. We're going to look to see if there is a relationship between enjoying reading and reading literacy. And we're also going to see if there is a relationship between the index of economic, social, and cultural status, the ESCS variable, and reading literacy. So to do that, we're going to go back to the IDB Analyzer, and we check that we have the student and school data here. And we're going to select for analysis type, PISA student level data. We're going to select benchmarks using plausible values. And here you're going to have these three options: discrete with analysis variables, and cumulative. So the discrete is just going to give you the percent of students at each one of the levels. The discrete with analysis variables will give you the percent within each achievement level, proficiency level, and the mean on the variable and of a variable of interest. So this is the one that we want to select because we want to look at the average ESCS and the average your reading by proficiency level. And the last one is cumulative, where it's going to give you the percent of students at or above a level. So if you want to say, what is the percent of people or students that are at level 3 or above, then you would choose cumulative. So we're going to choose discrete with analysis variables. Then we're going to go down here, and our analysis variables were reading enjoyment. That's going to be read joy, or JOYREAD. Move to the right. And the other one was the ESCS variable. And we have it here. We're going to move it to the right. For plausible values, we're going to choose reading literacy. And for achievement benchmarks, we're going to choose, you'll see that as you hover over the numbers, it will show you the scale that they belong to. So we're going to choose the first one for the reading literacy. And it will populate the numbers. You also have in the manual the numbers. If you want to type them in manually, you can also do that. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cut points. So it'll be 8 levels. The other thing that you could choose to do is you could say you want to delete this, the lowest one and the highest one, for example. And instead of having 7 cut points, you're going to have 5 to make it 6 groups. And this will be helpful because you'll see that there's very few people at the top and there's also very few people at the bottom. So by reducing the number of cut points, you might get be able to tell a better story or be able to get more people within each of the proficiency levels. So let's check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cut points. You could also say 400, 500, 600 and say these are the cut points that I'm going to use. But let's do this, select again, reading literacy, and let's get rid of the highest and then of the lowest. So we'll have 5 cut points, 6 groups. Then we go here, output files, and we're going to do proficiency levels, with read joy and ESCS. Notice I don't leave any spaces here because he won't allow me, if I leave a space there, it's that I cannot have special characters. So I have to use, so reading proficiency level, reading proficiency level with read joy and ESCS. This is going to go in the work directory, save, and then we start SPSS. And we see that we get the syntax that looks like this. And like in example before, you do Control A, Control R, or you run all. And here you'll see the progress of the analysis. So once it's done, you'll get something like this at the bottom of your output file. And I'm gonna go to the top, again do some checking. So here we have the first, the unweighted descriptive statistics, Germany, plusable values, the 10 plusable values, and the two variables in the analysis, joy-like reading, and index of economic, social, cultural status. And what we check here is basically that the minimum and the maximum values are reasonable. We don't want to see any negative numbers here, any numbers beyond like 950 or something like that. The means are have to be reasonable. Standard deviation. Remember the PISA scale is mean 500, standard deviation 100, so that's sort of what you want to see here. For the joy reading, these scales were scaled to be between about -3 and +3, so that's what you see here. The same with the ESCS. It goes a little lower and a little higher, but it's within the expected range. So this is unweighted statistics. Then we're going to go down and we'll see, so we have one per country. Now we have weighted statistics. And again, these are weighted, but we haven't integrated the plausible values yet. That's going to happen at the end. Keep scrolling down. Now it's processing 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, it's doing the 10 separate analysis, one with each possible value, and then it's going to combine the results. And then here are the results that we're looking for. For each country, we have the performance group, and it's going to give you here using the cut points. Here you have the number of cases in that level. Here you have the sum of the weights, and this is the estimated number of students in the country that are below 334. So in Germany, about 6% of the students, or the 15-year-olds, which represent about 38,000 students, are below 334. Their average joy reading is minus 0.63. The standard error and standard deviation percent missing. Notice here something curious, that those at the lower level have more missing in the reading joy variable. We keep scrolling down. We see the same, we see the same pattern in Malta, this is Singapore, Sweden, the United States. So those that are higher in reading actually tend to have fewer missing responses in the reading enjoyment variable. So we keep going down. We have the table average, so the average of the countries above. And now we get to the graphic, and we'll see that, this is what we sort of would expect, right? That those that are at or above 625, or those that are at the higher reading, those with higher reading literacy enjoy reading more than those with lower reading literacy. And the pattern is pretty uniform across all the countries. So it's sort of flat here, I would say, and then after the fourth level here, 480, then the enjoyment of reading increases, the average enjoyment of reading. We scroll down, we see the same pattern in a bar chart. It's an increase, increase, increase. There's a drop and an increase here. And then here we have the proportion of students at each one of the proficiency levels. So Singapore has the most students in the highest level, followed by Germany and Sweden, and then the United States, and then Malta last. Then we're going to have the results for the ESCS variable. So it's going to start processing the ESCS variable, and that's what we have here. Here we have, again, the performance levels, number of cases, and we have the percent of people at each one of these levels, and the average ESCS. So this is the index of economic and social cultural status. And if we keep going down, we see that we also see a clear relationship between the proficiency levels and their ESCS. So it goes, those that are at the higher levels do have a higher ESCS index. And there are differences. So Sweden has, on average, the most wealth, but still the relationship is there. Get the same bar chart with the same information, and a stacked bar chart with the percent of people at each one of the levels. This is similar, the same information that we had before. Now, if we look in the work directory, we'll see a series of files that have the results for the benchmark. So we have here, let's see here, we have reading proficiency levels, reading enjoyment, ESCS, and then we have ESCS by country ID. We have JOYREAD by country ID, and so we have from the bottom up, and these are sorted by date in which are created. We have the syntax. We have the significance results, and what this is basically testing. Let's open one of them. It is testing by proficiency level each country with everybody else. So it's saying basically whether is the percent of people at that level in Germany significantly different from the number of people at that level in Malta, Singapore, Sweden, and the United States. That's what that's doing. So that's the difference between them, and you're going to have the mean for the comparison groups, the mean for the reference group, and then you have all sorts of statistical information here. Here's the t-value for the percent difference. Here is the t-value for the difference in this case, the JOYREAD. So whether those at the difference between the JOYREAD variable for students in different countries that are at the same proficiency level. Or in other words, are those in country A happier about reading than those in country B, given that they are in a particular proficiency level. So you have the significance testing results of those comparisons. The manual has an explanation of what each one of these columns means, so I will refer you to that instead of giving you the information in this video. The other file that it gets created is this one, this Excel file, reading proficiency level with reading joy and ESCS. And I'm going to open this. And you'll see that there you have the results for reading enjoyment by reading literacy proficiency levels. Here the cut points that were used, the number of cases in each category, some of the weights, and then the average reading enjoyment. And if you scroll down, you'll see that here you have the results for the ESCS variable. A very common question here is the end. Notice at the end here is, I'm going to make this a little bigger. the n is not an integer, so you would expect, how come you have a 0.6, 0.9, 0.7, and 0.2, and so on. And remember that what this is doing is it's calculating the number of people within each proficiency level using each one of the 10 plausible values. So there's 10 different n's, and this is the average of those 10 different calculations that are done with each one of the plausible values. So that's why you have decimal points here for the number of cases. Again, the explanation for the headers here is in the manual for the IDB Analyzer. So again, once you run an analysis, you will get all this output in the directory where you're saving your results, and you may or may not need it. It might be enough to look at the results in your SPSS window. And in our third and last example set, we will look at the relationship between number of books in the home, school location, and reading enjoyment with reading literacy. And we're going to be using the linear regression module of the IDB Analyzer. Okay, to do that, then we're going to go back to the IDB Analyzer, and we're going to do some reselections again. So student level data, linear regression, using plausible values. So we're going to be using, we're going to be using books in the home. So in your home, how many books are there in your home? Go to the right. School location was the other one. Which of the following statements describes the school? Which school is located? Here we go. Q01TA. And reading enjoyment was the other variable. What's joy? Read. So we're going to put it here as a continuous variable. So a couple of things here. One, we have a continuous variable, the enjoyment of reading. And then we have how many books in the home. And if we right click here, we'll see that there were 6 categories. And for the which of the following, right click, it's also 5. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to tell it the number of categories. So we're going to do here 6, 5, and the reference category is, since the program is going to be dummy coding these variables, then we need to tell it the reference category. We could also do the effect, to choose between effect and dummy coding. So we're going to choose right now dummy coding for the purpose of this example. But I will encourage you, if you're curious about how that works, to go to the appendix of the manual of the IDB Analyzer, where we explain the meaning of this selection that we have here. So reading enjoyment, how many books in the home, and school location, we're going to be predicting. And here's a dependent variable. And for dependent variable, we're going to choose a plausible value, and it's going to be reading literacy. So we have by country. We're going to do analysis by country, linear regression, predicting reading literacy from liking reading, school location, and books in the home. And here, define, and I'm going to type here reading literacy from location, books, joy. And start SPSS. We get the syntax. And once we have the syntax, again, we could do Control A followed by Control R, or we do run all. And we'll see the progress here. Okay, so once you're done, You're gonna get this results here. So let's go over them, and let me point out to you some peculiarities here. The first thing that you'll see is the two categorical variables and their new values for the analysis. This is what's going to be dummy coded. Then we get how the variables were dummy coded. So here we have D2 goes with 0 to 10 books. Well, so 0 to 10 books, those that have 11 to 25 books get a 1 on this variable, 0 otherwise. Those that have 26 to 100 books get 1 in this variable, 0 otherwise. And that's where you're going to see here. So the D2 is going to represent those that are in category, the second category. The D3, those in the third category. D4, those in the fourth category, and so on. Then if you keep scrolling down, then we see the same thing for school location. So there's 4 dummy-coded variables to represent the 5 categories. And we get the results now by country by country. How many books in the home, categories, so on. Now we see that in Malta, there's only 3 categories for the community where the school is located, whereas in Germany there's 5. And when we get to Singapore, they're all number 5 here. So there's only 1 community here. So we'll see how that works out once we get to the regression results. So this is again important. This is why these descriptive statistics are useful to help you troubleshoot the results or help you understand the results. So then we have weighted statistics, and we have the processing of each of the plausible values and 80 replicates separately. So here we have the first set of results that we're looking for. This is the R squared. Then we have for Germany, Malta, Singapore, table average, and the United States. And then we have for each one of the countries, we have descriptive statistics. And let's take a look at Malta here, and we'll see that this category 4 and 5 have 0 variability. So there's nobody in those categories. And in Singapore, there's going to be nobody in any one of these categories. So we'll see when we get the regression coefficients that there won't be 1 for categories 2, 3, and 4 in the case of Singapore. And then we get the regression coefficients. And what we see here is the effect of reading. So how many points in reading you go up by a point gain in the reading enjoyment scale? How many points do you go when you go from having no books to few books to more books, more books, more books? And then what happens when you go from the small community to a larger community to a larger community, and so on. And the nice thing about this is that here you also have your t-value. So this is going to tell you, so we see here that books in the home is statistically significant. JOYREAD, statistically significant. Community membership, not so much. I mean, not so much meaning not statistically significant. And that's what happens in Germany, Malta as well. Malta is actually the community, the bigger it is, the worse the results are. And they're statistically significant. And here we have the results for Singapore. You see nothing for the community, and you see them for number of books in the home. See how they go up, up, up. So this is the output that you get in SPSS. Now, if we go to our work directory, and we're going to do here PISA 2018, the Academy PISA 2018 work. You'll see that There are several files here. One with the coefficients in Excel and SAV file. And if you were working with SAS, you will get a CSV file here. And if you open this, you would have the regression coefficients. So this is the same information that was displayed in the table, but now you have it in an Excel file, and you also have it in a SAS SAV file that you can use and manipulate with either SPSS or some other software. If you have here a model, for example, you get the R squared for each one of the countries. With the regression, you get all this output here. You get the syntax, you get the model statistics, you get the descriptives, and you get the coefficients. So to summarize what we did in this video, we used the IDB Analyzer to generate several report tables at once using the PISA data. We conducted significance testing and generated several related graphs, and we conducted a linear regression analysis. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. For questions about the contents of this video, please ask us by email by writing to egonzalez@ets.org or falk.brace@iahamburg.de, or ask us during our next online session.
This video was created for the academies held by the IEA ETS Research Institute. Any commercial use of this video is prohibited unless explicitly authorized in writing by the Institute or its funders. Funding for the Institute comes from the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement and the Educational Testing Service.